The first month of the year is over, so it's time to check in with how my January reads went. 558 pages and almost two books. I'm about 87% of the way through the second book that I started during January, which does make it feel a little weird doing a recap right now, but this is what we do. Hi, hello, welcome in. I'm Jerrica, and I'm an editor, writer, and all-around content creator, and obviously I enjoy talking about what I like to read. And I really like to share kind of like my thoughts about books through the lens of an editor and writer, as well as a reader for their pure entertainment value. This month I completed this quarter's required nonfiction read and began and almost finished a classic romance. One of the many types of romance I'll be reading this quarter, or hopefully reading this quarter. I started the year with a short, easy read called The Writer's House in Wales by Jan Morris. This is a memoir, and I did enjoy it. It was missing something that I was expecting based on the title. I feel like there wasn't quite enough of the like writer part of The Writer's House in Wales. But that isn't to say that it was bad in any sense of the word. I do think that it's probably an acquired taste for the structure and kind of mostly the voice of the way that it's written. It's very conversational, and I wasn't really sure that I would like this, but it very quickly grew on me. And it's weird that I think I might not like it, because I do find that a lot of the writing that I currently do is very conversational. Like my blog posts, I feel like I tend to make very conversational, but this one kind of took that a step further. It was very much like we were actually like at the property and walking through the house, all the way down to being offered tea as we sat at the table. And I think this is like a unique, fun way to write. And I think it tells me a lot about the author, because the author is also a travel writer. And so I feel like this memoir kind of really pulled on that, like really taking you to the house and walking you through being there. But that's not something that I've really read a whole lot, which kind of makes me want to look into reading some more travel stuff. I don't get to travel a lot myself, but I'd like to, and maybe I can live vicariously through travel writing more than I thought. I do think the structure of the book was also interesting, because it kind of like pairs down as it goes through. So the first section is kind of talking about Wales as a whole and what it is to be Welsh. And then it kind of like pairs back to like the property and the house, and then kind of like what it was like to be a writer living in that house. However, even in that section, I feel like I wanted just a little bit more about the author's experience as a writer. But I don't think this is like the book was bad. It was just not quite up to like the expectation that I had. I think that's all I have to say about this one. Let me see if I have any notes in my phone really quick about this one. I took like almost no notes on this one. That's so interesting. There's two things that I took note of. One of them is simply that I was jealous of the Norwegian cat that they were talking about. There's this like breed of cat called the Norwegian forest cat. I'll see if I can find some pictures and put them in. But it's basically just like a very large, very fluffy cat. And I was like, I want one. But at the same time, I don't really want a long-haired cat, because they're even more work to take care of than my two little domestic short hairs that I have. And then the other thing is something about like Welsh mythos that I connected to Game of Thrones, and I wonder if there was actually like if that's actually where things were kind of like pulled from. I never read A Song of Ice and Fire or any of the books, but I watched the show, so maybe it's like more obvious or less obvious in the book as well. But it talks about a crow and a name. Yeah, so it says, I revere the rooks roosting in the beech trees because Bran, or maybe Braun, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, because it's got a hat on the A. The archetypal crow is fundamental to Welsh myth. It was the hero Bran the Blessed, bird transmuted into man, whose head was buried at the Tower of London near the beginning of time and is today apotheosized into the ravens of the tower and fed by beef eaters. So I just like I made that like random ass connection, and that ended up in notes. But those are the only two things that ended up in my notes for this book. I do feel like I've been taking notes less and hoping that I just remember things, and that's definitely not how I should do things because my memory is a little better than it used to be, but it's still not great. But I think that's it for this book. So then I jumped into Women in Love by D.H. Lawrence. And like I said, I'm so close to the end of this. I'm about 87% of the way through. So I am just going to talk about it, even though I haven't quite finished it. I feel like I'm far enough through that I can give a lot of thoughts on it. My first kind of like big thought about it is that this is the first romance novel that I've read. I read a novella during Christmas, and I'm planning on reading another one from the same collection. But this is the first novel I've read, and it being a classic is very clear to me for a couple of reasons. The first one being that there are like these giant asides that are kind of like waxing poetic about like social and philosophical ideas, and some of them have to do with love, but some of them are like it feels like the book is trying to conquer a lot of different themes, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But what I have kind of experienced is that when we get to the romance of it all, I am really enjoying that story. And then I'm kind of like upset when we're talking about these grander themes, especially if they aren't kind of along the love thing of it all. Some like they're all serving a purpose. A lot of them are for characterization, like they're, you know, the thoughts of Birkin or the thoughts of Gerald, or somehow less so the thoughts of Gudrun and Ursula. I've found feel like Birkin and Gerald get a lot of their their thoughts out in this way. Not that the two women don't also, but they just seem to be less long-winded in their thoughts. And I, of course, should have known this going in. I can also tell that it's a large book, so, I mean, there was always going to be a lot. It's a classic, there's always going to be a lot. But it did kind of solidify for me that I do enjoy romance. Obviously done the right way, but I just, the sweetness and the attention to detail of the emotions and reactions of the characters, kind of like those little moments of realizing your feelings for a person. I've been really enjoying that. And I think it's because, like, I like things that make me feel emotions. So that's why I like horror so much, because I can feel the, like, scaredness or the disturbedness of the story that's happening. And I guess maybe because I haven't experienced the, like, strong feelings of love from writing before, I wasn't sure that I would get that out of a romance book. Because I find both writing and like just like other media, I feel like it takes a lot more for me to feel the like positive emotions. I feel like those are a lot harder to like hammer home than the more like negative ones, or the more negative ones. Like, I feel like I can very easily get myself into a rage or into a fear, or into a sadness. I can cry over sad things really easily. But to get me to cry over happy things, it takes a little bit more. It has to be, like, really, really hard hitting, I suppose. And I guess maybe I need, like, more, like, difference. Like I can go from like neutral to sad really easy, but I feel like I've got to, like, if we're going to happy, like I got to be real sad first or something. There needs to be like a larger difference in emotions for me to get to that, like really feeling a positive emotion. And maybe that's a me problem. I don't know. I don't think that's like a writing problem. It's just like something that I experience. What else about this? That was kind of like the first thing still. Oh no, that was kind of two things. There's a scene relatively near the beginning that really feels like it comes out of nowhere, and I still don't quite understand it. I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't read it. If you have read it, the lapis lazuli. And that's all I'll say. I still don't understand that scene happening. I feel like we forgot that it happened. Like, the best I can do is that it adds to characterization. However, I feel like there's too much of a physical thing that happens that we just, like, brush off as having not happened. Like, what were the consequences of that scene? It feels like there weren't. Well, there was one obvious consequence of a parting of ways between two people. But I feel like there is a whole other piece of it that is far more tangible that we kind of just forgot about. Let me pull up my notes for this one because I know that I have a couple other notes. I do appreciate when I leave myself page notes. Oh, I think it's this, this line. So it says, marriage is a social arrangement, I take it, and has nothing to do with the question of love. And this is kind of like a theme throughout it, is like whether marriage matters or not. And kind of like the idea that marriage is a social arrangement or a lawful arrangement and really has nothing to do with whether you love someone or not. And that means both like whether the marriage contains love or not, but also if you love someone, do you really have to get married? And this is probably a huge reason of... No, that made no sense. I'd suggest that that is like a major theme, as far as like pared down themes go. So like obviously love is like a theme, but like the idea of marriage versus love, or love within marriage or love without marriage, that I feel like is brought up very early by Gudrun and Ursula, and then is kind of continued through with them, but then like the addition of like both Birkin and Gerald's ideas as well as Hermione's ideas, and you can even argue like Gudrun and Ursula's father, and then also like Gerald's parents. Yeah, I think that's probably the main obvious theme throughout, which is interesting, and I mean for its time makes a lot of sense. A lot of like women's rights things, and the idea of being, oh my gosh, what's the word for like the idea of like being a spinster. But then also like the switch over of like women getting jobs and things like this. Yeah, there isn't like a whole lot on that, and I would have to do any research to actually like have an intelligent conversation about what point in women's rights this is taking place in. I would say there have been a fair amount of times where I've like looked at the prose and thought, this isn't great writing. And I feel like it's always a terrible thing to say. Not about any book. I feel like you can talk about the pros of books being good and bad all the time, and I think you should do that. And I think things can still be super enjoyable even if the prose isn't great. Like I think there's a lot of like balancing of like great prose and great story and great character, and all of these things can kind of come together in varying degrees, and like all of them like create like a 4-star read or something like that. Like if you have like one that's like really, really good, but one that kind of like falls behind, it can still be a good read. You know what I mean? But every time that like I read a classic, especially ones that we like were supposed to have read and studied in like university, I feel like we should be choosing books that are like really good. But the different, and I think that this is kind of the hinge on that, is it's the difference between like literary greatness, we'll use, I can't think of another word right now, and then like writing greatness. Like literary is like more about the ideas, which is what those English classes were about when I was in university. It's about the ideas of the story, not necessarily execution, although execution like matters to a degree. And then, like, the editor's side of me is very much about execution as well, but then, like, with ideas as well. It's just, like, a different balance of thought, I suppose. So it's just, like, interesting to know that, like, this was chosen as something that we were supposed to look at for its literary qualities, but then I read through it and I'm like, yeah, but it could have been written so much better. But at the same time, would it still contain those same literary qualities if we changed the way it was written? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I think a lot of classics could have been a lot shorter than they are. Or they could have been like multiple books. Another quick note on structure is I think this is something that writers, editors, publishers think about more now, and that's not character length, chapter length. Because I am a person who really likes to like read in chapters. Like I don't really like to end in the middle of a chapter. But with this one, I have had to do it a lot because there are some chapters that are like 7 pages long, and then some chapters that are like 60 pages long. And if you look at my story graph, pages read graph, you'll note that I usually read about 20 pages. Like little more, little less to like hit those chapters. But when there are chapters that are like 60 pages long, it's taken me days to finish that one chapter. And I'm actually in one of those chapters right now, literally 60 pages long. And I can point to like 4 billion different places that we could have split it and it still would have made sense for like a chapter ending. Like there's so many scenes in this chapter. And like not just like scenes like that like flow into each other, but like time passes between them. And they're doing very different things that I just don't understand why we need to have them as like a 60-page long thing. Like I don't mind short chapters, and I don't mind some variation in chapters even, but I feel like 60 pages is too long for a chapter. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Something that I'm struggling with, kind of like character plot wise, is the extremes of emotion between couples. And yeah, it's been a little confusing, and yet I understand it to a degree. It just feels like there's like a lot of animosity between couples, and yet they go from that animosity right into like the passion of love. Not like boinking, but like they go from like I hate you to I love you, like in a breath. And again, like I kind of get that, but it happens a lot, and it kind of makes me wonder like is it really love? Is it really hate? Why is it so extreme? Because, like, annoyance or, like, disagreement makes sense to me in a relationship. But this is something else. And this actually kind of goes back to lapis lazuli. Okay, I think I'm finished talking about this one. It's obviously good enough that I'm still reading it. I don't know that it's like my favorite, but I think it's been an interesting kind of introduction to romance as a genre of novel. And I'm very curious to see like how romance, like a classic romance, and like a more modern one, like I plan on reading like a romantasy and like a science fiction romance as well, possibly if we get to them. And I think comparing those is going to be really interesting. When I'm finished with Women in Love, I think the next thing I'm going to read is going to be a novella out of Christmas Revels. I think I can't remember what they're called. There's one where it's like a case of mistaken identity, and that one is a possibility. And then the other one, the title is something about a cuckoo clock, and the title intrigues me about that one. So it's going to be one of those two. And then I should go and pick up a copy of ACOTAR. If I do that in time to start it after that novella, that's probably what I'm going to do. If not, it'll probably be another classic, because I have Northanger Abbey, and I think I need a shorter read, if it's going to be kind of heavy. Like, I don't think I'm ready for The Time Traveler's Wife, after reading this, just because it feels like it's going to take some, like, mental, I guess it's just, like, attention to paying attention to the way, like, because there's going to be, like, timeline weirdness from what I understand. I think that takes, like, a bit more mental power than the romantasy will. I think the romantasy will be a much more, kind of just like fun read, even though it's also long. So that's kind of what I'm thinking for going forward from here from my quarter TBR. There's also another book that I was recommended that doesn't kind of like fit into the themes of this TBR, but I'm allowed some wild cards. That's the whole point of switching up the way that I'm doing my TBR. I think it's like 120 pages or something like that. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. If I remember and feel like it, I'll put it in here. But apparently it's like a quick read, and so like maybe throwing that in to kind of just like spruce up my reading experience to avoid reading slumps. Let's do that. We don't want those. So that might get thrown in just as kind of like a wild card. So if that happens, might be an exciting recap for next month. You can keep up to date with all of my reading, writing, and other stuff that's going on Instagram. As I'm recording this, the first newsletter from Patreon, free Patreon, I don't even have a paid tier over there. It is just to house my newsletter right now, for logistic reasons. Although I would love to be able to format more. It should be coming up on Friday, but I'm not quite sure when this video is coming up. Ideally, it goes up tomorrow. We'll see if I have it edited by then. But that's another place to keep up to date with my stuff. And if you ever need an editor, you know where to find me. I do always want to hear about what you guys have been reading, so let me know how your reads of January have gone, and also tell me what's coming up this month, I guess, for you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys had fun. I had a blast. Catch you next time. Bye.